Tom Middendorp is a retired general. He commanded Task Force Eurozgan in Afghanistan and was involved in missions in Bosnia, Mali, Somalia, and Iraq. From 2012 to 2017, General Middendorp was Chief of Defense and Commander of the Dutch Armed Forces, the highest position in the Dutch Army. General Middendorp currently heads the International Military Council for Climate and Security and supports innovations in the field of energy transition and water extraction. General Middendorp, welcome.
Thank you.
Can you tell us what prompted you to write your book, The Climate General, and what you expect from it?
Well, first of all, I never expected to write a book, but what prompted me was my concern about the legacy we leave behind for our children. I've been involved in more than 20 missions all over the world, and increasingly I found out what a risk multiplying effect climate change has on these conflicts. In Afghanistan, I witnessed, as an operational commander, how water shortages created all kinds of tensions in populations and how the Taliban used those tensions to gain control over these populations. We had been fighting for days in the village to free it from the Taliban, but only to find out that the tensions were still there. And once we addressed the water problem in that village, it became quiet and the Taliban couldn't return. And I saw the same in other mission areas, like in Somalia fighting piracy, in Iraq where Daesh occupied the Mosul Dam and used that as an instrument of power. So climate increasingly became for me one of the biggest challenges we are facing for this century. And I'm really concerned about the legacy we leave behind for our children. It became increasingly clear to me that climate change is also a matter of national security, that it really drives the change and acts as a risk multiplier, especially in the fragile regions around us. There is a direct interest for us to be involved in solving that.
General Middendorp, it is uncommon to hear senior military officers talk about climate change. We still hear scientists and environmental activists much more often. What do you have in common with these scientists, and do you think that things are beginning to change?
Well, what we share is a concern about the impacts of climate change. And what I bring is how it affects our security environment, how it directly threatens our vital infrastructure, how it shapes the security environment around us, how it brings instability in fragile regions, how it brings geopolitical change around the world. And that's the insight that I bring to the table. I think that I was the first acting Chief of Defense who ever addressed this issue, this connection between climate and security. And it gave a big surprise in my own country. Screaming headlines, Chief of Defense predicts climate wars. And the environmental groups were upset because I was hijacking their topic and turning it into a security topic. And it's the only time ever I went viral on social media. So it had an enormous impact and it gave me the nickname Climate General. But I decided to use that name as a title of honor and to work on this topic more fiercely and to dedicate the rest of my life to addressing this enormous challenge for our future generations.
In your book, General Middendorp, you give an extensive overview of how climate change is already affecting our global security, almost everywhere in the world, and has been doing so for decades. Do you think awareness of these facts is getting more widespread?
I think so, yeah. In the beginning, I was a lone fighter on this topic, and then we shaped this HCSS organization, which is a network of experts from more than 40 countries all over the world, experts like me, senior leaders, who share the same concern, and we could raise our voice. And increasingly, we could build that awareness, build that understanding on what the relation is between climate and security. I've also learned the importance of being prepared for new challenges. Climate change is a very uncomfortable topic for defense organizations. But if you realize how it will affect your work, I think it's our responsibility to take it seriously, to be prepared, and make sure that we can address the future challenges coming from it.
In the second part of your book, you propose a vision and a range of solutions. You mention the need for a Delta climate plan and the difficulty for politicians to juggle the urgent and the important. If you had to summarize, what would be the key elements of your strategy?
Well, I think that defense needs to realize that they have a role to play. And they need to be a team player in the wider whole of government effort to address the challenge of climate change. And it all starts with awareness, with understanding what the problem is and how it affects our security. And from that awareness, you can do forecasting. You can further look ahead and work on predictive modeling, on scenarios, on how to deal with that. And you can be prepared for what's coming towards us. And you can avoid them, all these effects from happening. So we can also be more preventive in our operations. The military often is being used when it's too late to address the consequences of something that went wrong. But by addressing root causes and helping to address them, we can prevent wars from happening. And we all know what the price of a war is. As a military, I've seen that. And we want to avoid that as much as we can. And then, of course, there is the technology side. Defense has long been a platform for all kinds of innovations. Defense brought the internet, GPS, all kinds of new technologies came from the defense area. And I think we can also be a platform for green innovations. Green innovations that can help society, but also ourselves, become more self-sufficient in our operations, reduce the logistical burden, and reduce the impact we have on our surroundings. So it's a win-win situation if we invest in that.
Among these solutions, General Middendorp, are there any tangible examples, any successful experiences and good practices that can show the way forward?
Well, I think there is a huge opportunity here for the defense sector. If we can build our future bases in a way that they are self-sustaining, that we don't depend upon scarce resources, on long supply lines, it really improves our operational effectiveness. If you can produce energy on the spot, if you can produce water on the spot, spare parts, printing them on the spot, then that really reduces the enormous logistical challenge we have in every mission at this moment, and the costs connected to that, and also the risks connected to that. So there is a huge benefit, and a good example is an innovation I'm involved in now to extract water from the air on a local level. This is an innovation where with very limited electricity you can extract water through a condensation process and produce water in any area in the world. Even we tested it in the middle of a desert, and even there it worked. You could produce thousands of liters of water per day, which really takes away a large part of your logistical burden, because now we have to transport millions of bottles of water to mission areas. And when you can produce that on the spot, you don't have to do that anymore. And this is just one example of what new green technologies can bring us.
I have one last question for you. By virtue of your career, both military and now civilian, you have a great deal of international experience. You have close relations with many European counterparts, and you have an in-depth knowledge of the United States and other countries around the world. However, both you and your co-author and former speechwriter are originally from the Netherlands. Do you think your Dutch roots have anything to do with the fact that you wrote this book? Is there anything, either in terms of your relationship with nature or the culture of cooperation between military authorities and civil society, that might be particularly useful to share with the rest of the world in these complicated times?
Yeah, I think people also know the Netherlands as a country that is being adaptive to changing climate throughout the centuries. The water is our oldest friend and our oldest enemy. Water allowed us to become a trading partner for all over the world, to sail the seas and become a rich country. We are also the port of entry to Europe because of our location at the water. But at the same time, it's a big risk factor. Our country has been flooded several times. 1/3 of the country is below the sea level, and half of the population lives below the sea level. So we realize every day how vulnerable we are against climate, and we have learned to adapt. We've taken land from the sea, we have given land back to the sea over the ages, and I think in our genes there is a deep-rooted sense of adaptation. We know how to adapt to that, and I think that's something that the Dutch can bring to the table. We have learned in the Netherlands that investing in your defense against climate change is investing in your own security. There is no discussion about the billions we put into our Delta works, into our protection. No discussion at all, because we know our existence depends on it.
Thank you, General Middendorp.